Hello every folks, and welcome to the wild and wacky world of recruiting stuff. There's a lot of different recruit skills and a lot of things to cover when it comes to recruiting for Tactics Ogre Reborn, because the rules are slightly different from how they were before. Okay, so first and foremost, what does recruit even do? Well, basically it is a action skill, basically meaning that it can be used alongside your primary move for the turn in order to recruit something. They across the board cost 25 MP to use and are basically a fantastic way to sort of finish off a unit without actually bothering to fight them. With the added benefit that they will now become your permanent recruit. You can rename them and do whatever you want with them. But there's a lot of little quirks when it comes to this skill, because it's not as simple as just going up and, asking the person to join. There's a lot of things that can make it potentially not work, not the least of which is high health. So first and foremost, if you're going to recruit a unit, the most important part to consider is going to be their HP bar and their loyalty. So every unit that you look at on the field is going to, obviously, the percentage of its health remaining is fairly obvious, but one thing that doesn't always get considered and may confuse some folks is their loyalty. So if you mouse over the unit's name over here, it'll tell you how they feel about their leadership. Now, bear in mind, while it is written in a sort of kind of a speaking to you type of tone here, this is basically them talking to their boss. So, for example, this unit often speaks openly of its distaste for your decisions. This is them talking to their boss. Essentially, they hate their boss, which is currently themselves, funnily enough. They're apparently a very self-loathing zombie. Anyway, so they're just kind of over here hanging out. Now, that's the first thing to consider. A high loyalty unit will generally have far lower recruit odds, whereas a low loyalty unit will generally have far better recruit odds. Whether or not this happens depends entirely on context. For example, if you're attacking a castle full of a bunch of very die-hard supporters of their cause, they're going to be a little bit harder to talk over to your side, whereas, for example, right here, bunch of randos in the middle of the woods just kind of hanging out, they're probably going to be a bit more open to discussion. Alright, next thing to consider is the type of recruit skill that you're using, because in many cases, folks just may simply be using the wrong one. Because in many cases, these skills will actually apply in more than one situation, the most open of which is recruit. If you have any unit that can use recruit, honest opinion, this may be a bit of a hot take, but personally, I feel like it's one of those kind of mandatory skills to have on there because it is very powerful. Essentially, if a unit is below half their health, this more or less allows you to go for anything from, like, let's say 5 to 40% chance to just completely eliminate them out of the fight. This can be incredibly powerful, because again, you not only take out an enemy unit, but you bring them to your side as well. So you have a different recruit skill for every type of racial class, but again, that's not the only type of thing to consider. But for example, Subdue would work on monster units, Tame would work on dragons, Recruit would work on people, and interestingly enough, this actually does work on zombie variants. So like, for example, right here, we look at these zombies over here in the Feral Coast, and this will actually get us to our next point here, which is that the UI actually tells you whether or not you can recruit somebody. So as you see right here, if we mouse over any of the human characters with a recruit here, there is a blue circle that says that they're open to dialogue. However, if we were to mouse over to this monster unit over here, to this beast unit technically, they would not count. Because interestingly enough, you can, unlike the PSP version, if you're coming from that one, you can kind of sort of be multi-classed in this one as far as racial stuff goes. So for example, humanoid zombies right here are apparently both classed as human and Umbra at the same time instead of just Umbra. Whereas, for example, a ghost would exclusively be counted as a phantom. So if we go over here, we'll see that if we mouse over to them, we'll see what they're primarily classed as. So like right here, it says even in death, they still hunger for the lives they once had. So a phantom would be like a skeleton or a zombie. You specifically need a necromancer in order to recruit, or actually, yes, no, you need a necromancer in order to recruit them. But at the same time, if you want to more broadly recruit all zombie types, you can get a Lich who can recruit Umbra instead. Now, previously in the PSP version, this used to mean that they would be the ones to use if you wanted to hire zombies, because these guys are primarily classed as Umbra, but for whatever reason, Recruit actually still seems to work on them in Reborn, so fantastic. There you go. You want a zombie Terror Knight? Go for it. You got one right there. You want a zombie knight? Go for it. You got one right there. Things to consider, by the way, if you're going for zombies, they can't change classes. Skeletons and ghosts can switch around what they're doing. Those guys can't. Anyway, this actually applies to beast units as well, so any beast recruit would work on a beast unit. Now, on top of this, there's a few other things to consider. For example, if you're wondering why, for example, you're mousing over a unit and it says that they are the right type, but you're not seeing this little blue circle here, this basically means that there's something interfering with it, and there's a lot of things that can. If they're not in their right mind or they're otherwise disabled, they won't be able to talk. And think about this fairly logically. If somebody's charmed, they're not in their right mind. They won't be able to talk to you. If they're terrified, they're not in their right mind. They won't be able to talk to you. If they're silenced, they don't know what the hell's going on. If they're petrified, well, obviously they're a statue. If they're asleep, well, if anybody's ever gotten punched by their spouse in their sleep, you know exactly what how that's going to go for you. Anyway, so as far as all that goes, if you see a little red X, there's something interfering. Usually it's going to be fear. In a lot of cases, folks will end up hitting a unit with a Terror Knight and then wonder why that unit is not recruitable. You can simply use ease on them, or you could simply surround them with your knights and wait for the debuff to pass on its own, and then attempt to recruit again. This is one of the reasons why knights and rune fencers typically are the ones that you want to have recruiting. Bear in mind that there are some that you wouldn't think are recruitable available later on in the game as well. So, for example, you might notice on your clerics there is a recruit divine option. So later on, they're the only ones that can actually talk to angels. There's not very many cases where you run into hostile angels that are open to negotiations, but when they are, you can get some free angel knights. Additionally, if you have any Vartans on your team, I don't think these guys are Vartans, are they? They look to be just archers. If you happen to run into any archers, or I apologize, if you happen to run to a Vartan, you start the game with one, but you can also make your own generic Vartans. You can actually use this in order to go and make sure that you're recruiting some fairies as well. Now, one kind of quirky thing to consider is that when it comes to fairies in particular, you may notice that there's one particular fairy type that you may have an issue recruiting, and that is going to be your rogues. Now, rogues were something that you could have in the PSP version, but you currently do not have in the Reborn version. Apparently there's some kind of like technical limitation with the fact that they had some different AI due to using traps, yada yada. It's a long story. Anyway, point being, if you see a little red mark on a otherwise seemingly recruitable fairy, it's going to mean that you probably want to check if they're a rogue, because rogue fairies cannot be recruited, but all of their skills are available from other places. Additionally, it should be noted that while some fairies, like for example the Galgistani fairies, will show up as gold, this does not mean that all variants of that color are specifically unrecruitable. But most fancy-colored variants cannot be recruited. So, for example, if you run into something like a hippogriff rather than a griffin, it's like a red-colored griffin, or like a phoenix. Basically, unique variants of particular unit types are non-recruitable. So that's they're basically just higher stat units of the same thing anyway. Just so you know, you're not really missing out on anything special. Like if you ever kind of cheated in those classes in the PSP version, most of the time they were literally just exactly the same thing with beefed up numbers. Anyway. So, I mean, sometimes they would have an extra skill or two cheated in, but really the main purpose of the skill is going to be for finishing off enemy units, as well as gaining access to some kind of more unique variants of certain classes. Again, like zombies right here. A zombie Terror Knight is absolutely horrific to have on your team, so definitely want to give that a bit of a consideration. If you're looking to recruit these kind of zombie-type units, by the way, there's a lot of them in Farampa. I believe back in the PSP version there used to be a Cyclops here. I think they took that out in favor of letting you recruit these zombies instead. Which, honestly, fair enough, because a zombie Cyclops this early is something extremely broken that I love to be using in that version. So, alright, anyway. As far as other variants to consider here, when it comes to your recruits and stuff like that, you can actually use this to break the level cap. So this is an interesting one. Basically, there's certain maps where a unit will spawn. Let's say you run to a random battle somewhere in Farampa here. And many fights, especially Pirate's Graveyard, love to do this, but as you're nearing Chapter 4, you may run into those moments where you want to break the level cap for one reason or another to just steamroll stuff. Just so you know, it's really more for the purpose of equipment. Honestly, levels are not where your big power spikes come from in the long run here. This is just more for fun, before somebody starts thinking this is necessary. That happens pretty often. I just thought I'd throw that disclaimer out here. But if you're looking to break the level cap, you may notice in a lot of cases, like right here, we have level 28 units. These guys are mostly 28s. Every now and then you'll see one that, for example, spawns at 29. So you recruit that guy. You'll notice that they cannot train any higher. They can't really. Nobody can catch up to 29. You haven't really pushed the level cap up exactly, but you have a 29 guy. Whatever the map spawns at will scale off of your highest available level. So, for example, we then go ahead and recruit the next guy. We send out the 29, and suddenly, oh, hey, look, a 30 spawned. And so then you come in with your 30. I was like, oh, great, fantastic. So then you use that 30, and then you send him out, and like, oh, now I can get a 31. And so it goes on for quite some time. So if you want to, break the hell out of the level cap doing it this way, this does actually allow you to access endgame equipment a lot earlier, because they will always spawn in with appropriate gear. And honestly, the big power spike comes from gaining access to worm scale equipment, rather than actually, getting those higher levels. Those are all well and fun, but, yeah, no, coming in with armor that can completely withstand any incoming attacks is going to matter quite a bit more. Anyway, so, yeah, go ahead and have some fun with that. Bear in mind that this does mean that some of those early crafted variants, like, for example, with your longbows, you have access to something like the Cupido bow, which is fairly, a little bit on the challenging side to get otherwise, but if you were, for example, to just go pick up a bunch of crescent bows, just go to the temple early, and then go back and just craft a couple of those bows, I mean, you suddenly have a bunch of mind control archers. I'm not saying you should, but you totally can if you want to. It's incredibly fun for challenge runs is what I'm getting at. Anyway, y'all have a good one. Hopefully this was some helpful information, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one of these, and I will proceed to get my zombie Terranite over here. All right, y'all have a good one. I'll see you then. Take care.